How's it going, YouTube? My name is Andreas, and in this video I'm going to talk about free rolling and split hold'em, and then also talk about the opportunity that these split pot games bring when it comes to live poker and how we can make money in them. What do we mean by free rolling? Free rolling is nothing but having locked up a part of the pot already for yourself and then still being able to win the other side of the pot. Why is it so special in split hold'em? Well, in split hold'em you got two boards, and that means that at the same time two people can free roll each other. Let's start out with this example here. We got ace jack versus king jack suited, and we got two boards, a jack 6-4-3 until a turn on the first board and an ace queen 6-5 with two hearts on the second board. Now, why do I read the boards by the turn? Because, you know, I want to make a point about what you can think of on the turn. First of all, there are only 40 cards in the deck left. You have two boards, that means we're gonna only have 52 minus 8 minus 4 cards, and your opponent's cards matter, so there's going to be 40 cards in the deck left. So the outs change a little bit based on how many cards there are left. Now, for both rivers, as you can see, it was that he had on the top board 3 outs to free roll me, otherwise it would win the whole pot or the half the pot on the top. And on the bottom, he had 8 outs for hearts and 4 outs for tens. So that's about it. He had 12 outs on the bottom out of 40, so that's a little bit more than 25%. And on the top, he had only the 3 outs, the 3 kings. So that's 3 out of 40. That's 1/13, about 7 or 8% to win. So I was free rolling him in this instance. And that's really what it comes down to when it comes to split hold'em. You just want to count your outs, what is, you know, most likely going to happen. And usually you don't actually know what your opponents might have. For example, on this board, it's interesting that there's an ace on both boards. That's a very common thing that happens in split hold'em. And when you do have the ace and the better kicker, you're often scooping. So when you both have the top card on both boards, then you are in a very good situation, of course. Here we don't have the ace, but we have a lot of outs on top. We have only 3 sixes, but also 9 clubs that we could hit for a flush, and then potentially overbet on the river since we have 1 lockdown. That's also something that's very important, that you overbet when you have 1 board locked and you probably don't win on the other, since you then can force out your opponent. Sure, you might be raking a lot more, but you also have to try to take down the whole pot for yourself when you in fact would only win half of it. Now on the bottom board we also have a king, so that it helps a little bit in case our opponent has an ace here. We will also make some 2 pairs with a 5 on the bottom some of the time. One of the most classic setups you can have is making a set on one board, and then on the other board you have a decent hand as well. Here we have second set on the top, which is almost always winning, and on the bottom board we have a full house. However, if we were up against a queen or a 7, of course, then, you know, it's just going to be a chop most of the time, or almost always of the time, because sure, he could have something like queen 3 suited or queen 5 suited, and that would actually be a better hand at this point, because, well, we just cannot beat his hand on the bottom, and that's oddly, even though it doesn't seem like a great hand, but he could still win at the top with queen 3 and queen 5 suited. So that would, even though it doesn't look like it on the first side, this would be the better hand in this case. And, you know, hitting both boards is more important than hitting one board very, very well, especially in heads-up pots sometimes, if it comes to just scooping and free rolling the other person when being all in. However, hitting one board, as I mentioned before, it enables you to overbet because you're so sure that you're gonna win, you know, one side of the pot, so you can force out the other player because he might be just afraid that he is beat at this point. Also, you can quite easily force out queen 3 and queen 5 in this spot because, well, if he has queen 3 and queen 5 and you make a large bet, he could be afraid that you have a hand like ace queen, which will be a very, very powerful hand in this spot. You have top pair, second kicker here, and on the bottom you would have a full house. So having ace queen here is much better than having set of sixes, a one-way hand, and then also depending on your sizing that you're using. I found this hand when I played this session the most interesting because it was really not easy in-game when six tabling to figure out this spot here. He has queen nine suited, he has a weaker kicker up top, but then in the end it doesn't matter as the jack hits the river and he basically splitting the top row. And on the bottom he has a flush on the flop, makes it on the turn, and then on the river, I don't improve to a full house, which is really difficult when you think about it. There's almost everything out. There's no queens left and there's only 1-10 left. And you need a 6 or a 4 for me to make a full house. So I have 1 out for quads. A 6 is dead here on top, which you have to count already. So it's 5 more outs to make a boat. And that's 6 outs on the bottom for me to outdraw him. However, I checked the river, he bet pot, I called, and I got at least some of it back, which I think is fine. He also played the hand fine, I believe. I like his bet size on the river. He gets some really nice value that way by hands that actually get 3/4. And maybe sometimes I want to call with a flush from the bottom and try to, you know, win half back as well. And then he will scoop me because he has a great hand on top too. So very interesting situation here in Split Holdem, and unfortunately we lost this one. Maybe you have been worrying too much about rake in this game because sometimes, I mean, at least the last time I played here, you see crazy players like these two guys. I actually was value 4 betting ace-10 offsuit since they were just playing any 2 cards. And then on the flop, we had like an SPR stack to pot ratio of 2. We didn't have much money behind. I flopped second pair on top and then 2 overcards on the bottom. We got the money in. We're up against Jack 9 suited and Queen Jack, which is not great because he has me beat on top, but I think he had very little money behind. So he had a large side pot with this Jack 9 guy. And yeah, while he has an open ender where he can make the nuts on the top with a king or an 8 and also improve with a jack, we also have 2 overcards in the bottom which we can improve. And as I said, it was you know, there was not much money behind, so we have to get the money in here. So don't be too worried. There's plenty of fish out there where you can get a lot of good hands in preflop. So if I whiffed on both boards, I could have still folded the ace hand, but once hitting the second pair with not much money behind, you have to go with your hand sometimes. Here I think at least half or a third of our stacks went in preflop. Sometimes you see a lot of people open jamming pocket pairs like 7s, 8s or 9s in this game, at least on a 25-cent limit, so you can still win at this game for sure. He has an interesting hand on the flop because he basically hits both boards fairly well. But the good thing about this game is when you have the better hand preflop, it's gonna stay the hand post-flop at least for half the pot most of the times. You know, you're almost never gonna lose both boards to a lower pocket pair with aces. Sure, it can happen that you get bad beat, but if your opponent's flops a set on one board, he's actually not going to be a favorite either. He's just gonna be able to win half the pot because if he has an 8 on one board, then he has only 1 out for the bottom, and then you have at the same time 2 outs to overset him on his board. So you're actually free rolling him for 1 out, which unfortunately with the rake in play is not a good situation to be in. The rake actually is more than 1 out. It's probably like 1.3 outs. That's according to my calculations. So 1 free roll out more than your opponent is not going to be doing it. So this is really what Stars needs to fix in order for this game to be more popular and, you know, more beatable long term. You know, if you get it in with 1 out more than your opponent, you're supposed to win money, at least a little bit, and then, you know, basically pay the rake for the rest of it. But it's not fair that you're obviously having a better hand and then not making money. So here's another example where I have a set of 6s, but, you know, it's almost impossible for me to win this at the second board. So here he was free rolling me, as you can see, hitting both boards, and that's really key, guys. If you want to win at this game, you want to hit both boards at the same time. He has top pair on the bottom and he has a flusher on top, and if you have those suited hands with high cards, which are really doing well in this game, you want to hit one board with your draw and the other board with a made hand. And if you do that, you can just shove all your money in and then even outdraw some very strong hands as a set. Sets are really not as great, but what happened here is basically that I was 3-betting him because he was playing any 2 cards, or way too many hands, and my pocket 6s are very unlikely to get outdrawn on both boards. that someone makes a pair on both boards, it's very difficult. And then sometimes I also can force out some middle pairs that are higher than me. Let's say he had a hand like 8-7 of diamonds on the bottom board. I might have forced him out with a set of 6s on top and he would have folded second pair on the bottom. That really might have happened. So, you know, in that case, those set of 6s are really nice and you can make a lot of money with those pairs. Here is a very debatable hand. I defended my big blind versus a min raise, flopped a gut shot and a flush on top, and on the bottom I turned a gutter as well. So what happened is I actually check out 2 very small bets and whiffed on the river, at least on top. Now this is a very, very tricky situation because imagine your opponent actually was drawing to the top board with a higher flush draw. Then if you get there and he has position on you, he gets to overbet. And then you're actually, are you just paying it off based on having a flush on one board and nothing on the other? No, you actually want to at least have a decent pair on the bottom. And that's why low suited connectors are not that strong in that game sometimes, because maybe you can make a straight, but the less connected they are, the less often that's going to happen. And if you really don't have something on the second board, I recommend you guys not calling those overbets when you do make a mediocre flush, because all you're doing is you're basically calling for half the pot. You're not going to get more back than that. So in this instance, this was very tricky. Sure, you always get a great price. And sometimes maybe you can, you know, start the betting lead yourself, maybe on the river overbet jam yourself, thinking that your pair on the bottom, like a 5s here, might be good enough. But here I also had a gut shot to the straight, so I think it's a little bit more justifiable for that reason, because if I hit the 6, it's going to be very clean. It's going to be robust equity. That's always good. And for that one, I can call a half pot size bet for sure. And then also put some pressure on him, maybe even check raise rivers in, if not, you know, leading into him on the river myself. This is another very common situation. It's ace X or ace with a better kicker domination in split hold'em. And in any split pot game, that's basically important. Domination really trumps in these games. I have ace queen, he has ace 10. We both flop an ace on top, and I have 2 better overcards in the bottom. Now, you know, in these scenarios, you know, if he didn't hit the 10 on a turn, it would have become really, really difficult for him. And those dominated ace X tend to really, really perform poorly because, well, your opponent can just put so much pressure on you if he hits either of these boards. Sure, in this instance, you know, there any 8 or any 7, especially 8-7 if he has it, like 8-7 of hearts would have been a prime check raise at some point because he would have had trips on both boards. Also, it's unlikely that someone has clubs because there's 3 clubs on top and 2 clubs on the bottom. That would have been also a great hand. 8-9 suited would have been a great hand on both boards since you're making a straight on the bottom by the river and trips on top. So there's a lot of better hands in my ace queen, but also I am aware that he has a lot of ace X in his range, and you know, a lot of them, except for ace 10 and ace jack and ace 3, don't hit a pair on the bottom. Sure, ace 7 makes also a great hand. So ace 7 is also a great hand. It hits both boards. It hits trips on the bottom and top pair on top. So you can put a lot of pressure on those ace queens. So here the pot really was staying small, even though I had him dominated because of the scariness of the second board and him potentially, you know, putting up a lot of pressure on rivers with a check raise with, for example, a one-sided hand. Just a quick reminder, when you have a bigger poker pair than your opponents, here he open jammed 80 big blinds from the button. The game is still soft. You're gonna win. Don't worry about it. This is really a situation where you just get raked once. Sure, you have 2 boards. You might split it sometimes when he hits a set, but this is how you make some money. They just open jam way too big stacks with some poker pairs. Here another all-in pre-flop. Ace king versus 5s. Again, we have the strong hand. Sometimes it would be great if we had another bigger poker pair here. It's not always going to happen, but you know, the game is so soft. Get in there. You know, you can't really win if you're playing a tight and good strategy and just wait for those big mistakes to happen. If you see guys like this here on top, Snellcourts or Herumchovich or maybe even this guy on the left, just leave the table. You don't have to play with other regulars. So just make sure you're on tables with people that are not liking money very much, and then you're gonna get the money, even though the rake is way too high in this game. Here I think I got min 3 bet or something, and what happened here, he went ahead and bet pot here. I don't want to draw here because I just have top pair, top kicker on the bottom, and on the top I have nothing. It's very easy for him to have pocket tens or better, or even a hand against like ace king could still hit on the bottom. And on the top he's way ahead because I still need to hit my other 9, which are the only 2 left. So if you don't hit both boards in a 3-bet pot out of position, just go ahead and fold. Unless you have a very strong hand, then you go with your hand because you know you got a lockdown on one board. Here, a very great example of when people are just trying to block bet. Their pot is basically $3.80. I'm risking $9.85 with a jam here. I think I'm always good here, or almost always good with his line. He was a big blind defender. It's unlikely he's gonna have a hand like ace, queen, or I mean, what could beat me on the bottom? Queen 8 suited, queen 7 suited, something like that. Queen 7 suited in itself is, I think, impossible because we got all 4 suits. That's really something you have to see. Queen 7 of hearts is not possible. You have clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds. If you see all 4 suits of a different rank, if you have 2 queens and 2 sevens, look at the suits. Does it make sense that my opponent is defending offsuit hands? Well, probably not. Probably they only have queen 7 suited. So if those hands are impossible and you know they're sticking to suited hands, then you already know that some hands are impossible. Look at both boards, work out the combinatorics. It's a very great exercise for other boards as well, or for other games. So let's get into a different game. It's pot limit number 5 card. We have a very interesting situation here. We got a 10-8-7-4, and we have an exact coin flip, an exact free rolling situations. We got 4 outs for Stason. He has the Jack 9-8-5. He has 2 pair and the nuts. He needs a both 2 10s and 2 8s to win the hand. And Sam has the nuts, and he also can get a 9, that's 2 outs, and a jack to make a higher straight to free roll his opponent. So in these games, you're gonna have very high variance. They're spread at the WSOP this year. Again, I'm pretty sure whether it's high-low or high or split boards or whatever. We're gonna see that at the WSOP this year. And they're great opportunities when you have a huge drunk fish who just doesn't see those free roll opportunities. And if you're doing this, you can make a bunch of money in these games for sure. You have to be a little bit aware though, if there's time rake and you got people playing really slowly, you want to raise up the stakes, because if you're playing for too low stakes, the rake affects things quite a bit. I was playing there at the WSOP last year, and what happened is we paid $10 of time rake and we got to see 5 hands. So you have to overcome $2 per hand with maybe $1,000 stack, just because your opponents are playing so freaking slowly that, you know, it's just impossible to do. So be aware of the rake. Try to play very high limits if you're good at the games and if you have a bad player in the game, so that a rake will matter less. I hope you guys enjoyed this video about free rolling. So if you did, don't forget to hit the thumbs up down here and subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. Appreciate your support, and then see you guys for the next one.